Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm the Whiskey Anorak and this is review 8B. I'm an anorak about whiskey, as you've probably gathered from the title, and I like to sit in my bedroom and talk about whiskey, compare them, review them, and talk about other subjects that surround bottles of whiskey and other spirits. I will get to them eventually after I've passed the 10 review barrier. I will start to bring in some of my rum collection and also mezcal. But for now, I'm talking about single malts. And this follows on from part A, where I reviewed this Abhainn Dearg, and what I said about this particular bottle was that I very much enjoyed it. I would buy another bottle again in the future. I haven't though, so bearing in mind sometimes I do go out and buy another bottle straight away. I've not reviewed any like that yet, although there is some in my collection. But in this case, I would hold off a little bit and wait until there was more different single cask versions available before ordering again. So just make of that what you will. It's not like I've rushed out to get a second bottle immediately, but I am enjoying it, and I would buy similar bottles as well again in the future. As you also may know, on this channel I buy everything that I review, so these are all from my collection. These ones are really just here. They're not involved in any of the comparisons or anything in the part C. I'm just using them to talk about the topic that I'm going to discuss today, which is mostly talking about how we develop in whiskey and sort of pushing our boundaries really in whiskey, and how I started off and how I am now, and what I think is generally a good way to go. So to start off then, I think initially a lot of people go to the supermarkets and buy single malt whiskies from there. They'll probably try Glenfiddich, probably try Glenmorangie, maybe Jura, the usual suspects that you always see crowding the supermarket shelves and don't really pick up many sales as far as we can see these days. But it's a good place to start if you haven't had, single malts before, because generally the whiskies on show there aren't too demanding. They aren't too interesting either, but as a starter and to introduce you, it's a good stepping stone. You might go on from there to try older versions or different cask matured versions of the same ones. Like I can remember when I was early in my journey, I had Glenmorangie, the standard expression, and it was around the time that they first started releasing was it Quinta Ruben and La Santa and all those finishes. And I think one was a Sauternes, one was a sherry, and one was a port, if I remember correctly. Can't remember the name of the third one though. And yeah, I enjoyed them quite a bit, and it provided a slightly different perspective on a distillery. And that's what made me get interested in doing comparisons, basically. And it didn't take long before I sort of graduated to purchasing whiskey from online stores, or sometimes in person in particular stores if it was, close by to one, which there wasn't many near where I lived really. So most of the time we'd be purchasing online, like from the Whisky Exchange or Royal Mile Whiskies and websites like that. And when I was broadening my horizons, I was still sticking with mostly with official bottlings, to be honest. I was a bit intimidated by buying independent bottlings because I'd heard that there could be variability, and that was something that I was thinking, well, I don't want to buy a bottle and it'd be a waste of money. But what I've learned since then is that as long as you do your research, the chances of you getting a bad bottle, especially these days, are quite reduced. You might not get the best bottle in the world, but if you do some research and have a look at recent reviews for a particular distillery from a bottler, even if it's not exactly the same as yours, you can get an indication of what sort of, casks they might have access to. So it took me a good I've been drinking whiskey for about 17 years now. It probably took me a good 5 or 6 years before I started trying the independent bottlers. And when I did, I think I had one bottle of Bunnahabhain, which was a signatory bottling actually, a long time ago, and I just didn't like it. I thought it was an older expression, but I thought it was just quite flat, and it was just in a tired cask, and it just didn't do it for me. So that sort of put me off a little bit from purchasing independent bottlings for a while, and I went back to just sort of having, official bottlings from, but older versions generally. So I think that is quite a good way to progress in your whiskey journey, which is to start with the supermarket well-known brands, get the slightly more older ones or differently matured ones, then start going into the online retailers or the specialist shops in person and asking them what they recommend. That's a good thing to do if you're not sure yourself, because a lot of the time the people working there will be whiskey fans, and that's the reason why they're there. And you'll get some good answers. I've certainly had a good couple of recommendations over the years which I wouldn't have even thought to try. So yeah, I think that's quite a good way to go. And what I find now personally, and obviously this channel is aimed mostly at people with quite a bit of experience of similar level to me, sort of in the middle of the journey, but obviously anyone can watch it. But that's where I am at in my journey, so that's how I'm going to sort of talk about things mostly. I find now that when I'm trying distilleries for the first time, I just go to independent bottlers. If it's a bigger, if it's a bigger distillery that's owned by Diageo or another conglomerate company, generally speaking, I won't waste my time with the official bottlings, because usually there's only one or two anyway, and what's there are not particularly good. So I steer away from them, and unless it's a small distillery like Abhainn Dearg, where there isn't any independent bottlings or there's very few, I will tend to just stick to the independent bottlings wherever I possibly can, because I tend to get better value for money. So this one here, this is a Mortlach, and this was actually my introduction to Mortlach. I think I had tried it years ago, but I never actually owned my own bottle of it, and this was the first bottle that I decided to own. I got this, I think it was around the middle of last year, I believe. Sorry, this is a Balmenic blooper. I don't do any editing on this video. I just click play, and if I make mistakes, I thought that I'd grab the Mortlach out of the cupboard, but I didn't. I grabbed the Balmenic. But the same point stands. I hadn't tried Balmenic either, and I've now got 3 bottles of Balmenic, and it should teach me to sort of do that before I start talking, shouldn't it? But this is a 9-year-old version that was matured in first fill Oloroso sherry butts. Balmenic uses worm tubs. It's quite heavy, meaty, barbecue, sulfury. It's great. I love it. And very different to the Abhainn Dearg. But I don't even know if there is an official bottling out for this, but if there is, it's probably not a patch on this release, so I tend to just avoid it. This one here is Woodrose, and I do know that this is Royal Brackler. I don't need to turn that one around, because I remember picking this one up. This one's bottled at 56.7%, and this is a Highland whiskey, which is mostly blend filler for the Dewar's blend. But on its own, I would say that it does have some character, but it's not a particularly strong character. And that's what you find sometimes. This is Delmore as well, by the way. This is an Adelphi bottling of a 9-year-old Delmore matured in a first fill bourbon barrel. You see more Delmore coming onto the market as independent bottlings. A lot of them are bourbon as well. I've also got a Cadenheads one, which is a bourbon heavily peated version of Delmore, which I haven't tried yet, but that might be quite interesting to compare to this one, which is unpeated. But what you find sometimes, or what I have found, shall I say, is when I'm trying smaller distilleries like Abhainn Dearg, I tend to appreciate what's in the bottle more, because I know what's gone into making it, because I've done my research on it, and I feel like I can taste in the bottle that is produced in a small way. And it's the same for other small distilleries like Lochley, Springbank, Daffmill. I feel like you can taste that in the bottle, because every little step contributes to the overall end. And if you change one of the steps, it probably wouldn't have a big impact. But if you changed all the steps, it probably would. And a lot of these distilleries are essentially mass production facilities, really. Obviously it's done in batches because it's single malts, but they're geared up for constantly running. That's why they have several sets of stills, usually these bigger distilleries, so they can constantly be generating product to go into blends, and also into some of the single malts. So that can be a completely different thing from having a very small independent bottling, very small independent distillery, because when you get these bigger distilleries, they're geared towards high production, high efficiency, so you're not going to be getting the same individual character in a lot of cases. In this case you do, because it's very heavy, it's very sulfury, but in some cases, like with Royal Brackler, and to be honest, Delmore does have a lot of character of its own as well, to be fair, but Royal Brackler, let's have a think of some other ones, probably Glen Grant, Glen Keith. There's a couple of others which have tried where it's obvious that they're not the best candidates for single malts. They do have their own character, it's just not very strong, and you can see why they're used in blends as they are to fill them out. But when you get these sorts of whiskies in a good cask, it can be a really good showcase of how a cask influences a whiskey and how much influence it has, and how it can bring up a whiskey that has been rushed in its production, not the best ingredients used, and you sticking it in a decent cask, which you tend to find with a lot of independent bottlings. They're in pretty good casks, or at least finished in them. I think this one here was actually matured in a refill hogshead, so let's assume that's bourbon. It doesn't say though. And it was finished in a first fill American oak Palo Cortado quarter cask. Now, it doesn't say the finishing period on there. I think I did read it online somewhere. It's about 18 months to 2 years, something like that. So it's obviously been quite an active Palo Cortado cask after that. And I've only had a couple of drams of this one, but it's certainly brought up the whiskey quite a lot, because what you can get in some cases when you have these finishes is the whiskies have just been sat in there in tired old casks which have been reused too many times, and the casks have been sold to the bottlers, and they've thought, well, we can't release it like this, we're going to stick it in a quality cask and bring it up. And sometimes you can taste that, but in other occasions, if the tired cask wasn't that tired, you can sort of bring it up and fill in any cracks that have been there and generally make it into a better experience that's worthy of being bottled. And in a lot of cases, you know, Woodrow's, I've got a few bottles of theirs now, and they're a pretty good bottler, as a Signatory, as are Adelphi. And they don't generally bottle rubbish, in my experience. I've never had a bad bottle. I've had bottles which are less interesting, shall we say, a bit more one-dimensional, and I've had ones which are quite complex. The way that you navigate that is by doing your research, which is something that I think marks a step in the development of like your whiskey journey, really, which is when, this is speaking from my experience, when I first started, I was literally just looking in the supermarket, reading the labels and getting my information directly from the labels, which I sort of laugh at myself doing that now and buying any of the marketing stuff, which I probably did buy at the time because I didn't know any better. But now I don't even, if I was buying an official bottling, I wouldn't even look at the label very much, apart from to check the percentage and any relevant information. I would have done my research online before doing that. And like I said, I've not got many official standard bottlings. I think I've got a 10-year-old cask strength Lafroig and a Highland Park cask strength batch 2, I think it is. There's a couple others as well, but generally speaking, I don't buy many official bottlings apart from smaller producers. And yeah, as time went on, I started to look less and less at what it said on the labels on these official bottlings and actually do my research. I started to look on aggregate websites like Whiskey Fun by Serge and look at some of the reviews that he'd done. He's got so many reviews on there that even if you can't find your specific bottle, there's probably one that's similar enough from the same independent bottler, if it is an independent bottling, for you to be able to make some sort of decision. The same for Whiskey Base. Whiskey Base is very useful. The only issue with that is that you need at least quite a few opinions to be able to gauge it, because sometimes you'll get a couple of reviews on there, say if it's a lesser known bottling, and one person will love it, one person will hate it, and the smell and taste notes will be completely different, and you'll just be left wondering, wow, what do I make of this? But it's all part of building up a picture of a distillery, and research as well isn't just looking at reviews. It's also having a look at the distillery, having a look at the history, which at no time in history has it been easier to have a look and do a bit of research on a distillery, see which production methods they use, what's the still design, line arm, you know, anything about the cask policy that's been released. Do they bottle on site? Are they growing their own barley in the area? Are they sourcing it locally at least? You can look into all these things and have quite a clear view of the whiskey before you even buy it. And then when you do buy it, what I always do is I get the bottle, I hold it up to the light, and I see if there's any sediment floating around in it. I upend it and see if there's any sort of sawdust particles on the bottom, because it just helps to build up a picture of how processed that whiskey is. And when I see whiskies from, you know, official bottlings or independent, where it does have sediment in, and then when I add water to it, the symmetry is thick and it's got a thick mouthfeel, and you can see that it turns cloudy after a period after adding water, it just makes it right. I'm going to buy from them again. And the ones where that's not so much the case, I tend to sort of gradually pull back from. And as time goes on, I'm gradually sort of moving towards distilleries and bottlers who obviously don't over filter the whiskey and select good casks and bottle quality stuff. So yeah, that's basically what my journey's like. So now before I buy a bottle, I'll research the distillery in detail. I'll look at the bottlings that have been available from the independent bottlers, and I'll look for some reviews. And yeah, sometimes I'll just sort of take a punt on a whiskey as well. Very occasionally, perhaps it's not got many reviews and I just think, well, that sounds interesting and I really want to try it. And to be honest, that's what I did with the Abhainn Dearg, and that's what sort of brought to mind me picking this topic for this part B review. I just went for this on a whim because I thought the production details sound very interesting. I'd seen some reviews which were positive, some which were not so positive. And I just thought, well, it wasn't too expensive. And for what it is anyway, as a craft produced product where it's mostly sourced on the Isle of Lewis in the local area, and it's bottled at 46%, it's natural colour, non-chill filtered, pretty much every step is done in-house really, and I think it's to be applauded. And I thought, well, I'm going to try it. And when I first tried it, I was a bit taken aback, but as I gave it more time, I've slowly grown to appreciate it, and I think it's one of those sort of bottles that I would at least want one bottle of it always on my shelf, to be honest. And I'm glad that I did take a punt. And sometimes you have to make an educated guess to try and push your boundaries a bit. If you just try and play it safe, like for me, playing it safe would be to just buy from the slightly bigger, small distilleries like Springbank, Daft Mill, these distilleries that I trust to pretty much always give good quality, or from independent bottlers like, say, Thompson Brothers Signatory, where the quality is nearly always up there. That would be playing it safe for me. When I'm sort of playing it unsafe, I'm going for distilleries that are more mass produced, but they still have some character to them that I want to experience to broaden my horizons rather than just sticking to the same few smaller distilleries. So it's a good way to access them is by going to the independent bottlers, and that's exactly what I've been doing recently. So let me just have a smell again between these two, which have continued to open up. So this is the one which I poured during the episode and the last episode, and this is one which I poured way before it. It's very fruity now. Even more so on this one, I'm getting quite a lot of melon, to be honest. The peat's now died off a little bit. It's still quite strong here on the nose, but I'd say it's died off a little bit. Let me just have a little taste. Yeah, quite peat dominant, peat forward, apple, lemon, cereal. Definitely a sense of the sort of dunnage, a bit of a stale, farmy notes crept in there as well. Lovely compared to this one. More malty now, somehow. There's a toffee caramel note as well. Of course, the saltiness is there in both. That's a dominant feature of this single malt, is the saltiness. And the aftertaste, I'm left with like a porridge, a salty porridge caramel is the best way you can describe it. Like I say, I don't go into overly detailed tasting notes on this channel because I find that to be the least interesting aspect of reviews. I just want to try and give the basics and let you know if it's complex or not. And this is, you leave it in the glass, you'll get a lot more notes on what I've mentioned, I assure you. So to try and sort of finish up then, the last thing I wanted to talk about is experts, or self-proclaimed experts in some case, in the whiskey industry. The way I think about that is when it comes to, say, reviewers or people who claim to be like, you know, whiskey commentators or, you know, critics, that kind of thing. We're all individuals with our own sense of smell and taste, and no one can tell us what we're going to smell and taste in a bottle. We've got to do it ourselves. So people who are commentators and who are, you know, whiskey analysts or whiskey critics, experts, they may say, they may have more experience, and that is an important thing, but it's experience for them. They can't really tell you what the quality is of something in the glass. So that's why I'm trying to focus on just telling you more about the quality of the production and what the methods used in making it are and what's in the bottle, rather than sort of saying, well, this is, you know, to my taste or not. Of course, I do have my own taste, but I generally like pretty much every style of whiskey. And I think that the experts in whiskey are the people that make it. The people who are in the distilleries, who actually physically make it, the people who manage those distilleries, and everyone involved directly, they're the experts in actually making it, in the same way that food experts are chefs, not food critics. Food critics are just people who vet a lot of food and have a strong opinion, which may not apply to most other people. Now, I get it, it's good as a guide to have that from people, and of course, I'm sort of, you know, trying to do a sort of similar thing to that. But the main factor in deciding what whiskey you buy should be your own opinion on what interests you and what you think you're ready for at your stage of the journey. I would say that if you're in your first couple of years, don't go for this. Give it a while. It's not a beginner malt. It's definitely one that is challenging, but it is rewarding when you get into it. But I think it needs a bit of experience of a lot of different types of malt before you can come to this and appreciate it. And that doesn't mean that people who don't appreciate it are wrong, because they might have a lot of experience and just might not like the style. But I do genuinely think that there's a lot to like here. That honey sort of sweetness, which is, I forgot to mention them, but it's still there. There's a very strong honey heather note to this that's probably got a bit stronger, to be honest. Let me have another. Yeah. It's really quite unique. I've never smelt it quite like that, to be honest. So yeah, I would just say that be wary of people who say that they're experts. We're all on a journey and we're all trying to increase our experience. If we're interested in the smell and taste and not just getting drunk, we're interested in trying to get the most out of a bottle and appreciate the effort that's gone into making it, and to be treated with respect by the whiskey producers as well, not to be called consumers by them, and to genuinely be appreciated for the fact that we, us whiskey geeks, are the people who are actually buying these sort of bottles, and we should be valued for that, in my opinion, the same way that we value the hard work that, you know, decent distilleries and bottlers do. So yeah, I would just say, just to summarize that, just be wary of experts, and my opinion of experts is that the only people who are real experts are the people who make it. They know all the intricacies of how you make, distill, you know, age whiskey, blend it, all that kind of stuff. And it's an art form in some ways, blending whiskey. I've tried it a little bit and it's hard to get a really good blend, to be honest, in the right amounts. And I applaud people who do it well. So yeah, I'd just say just watch out for that. And the most important opinion is your own. So with that, I'm probably going to call it a day there. No idea how long it's been going, because I can't quite see from here on the little screen that I've got behind the camera. So next time I'm going to be doing that comparison between this Abhainn Dearg here, which is a bourbon cask, single cask one, although this is bottled at 46%. I'm going to be comparing it to a 61% PX cask, which is a single cask version as well. And also I've got the 3 options out there for review for you to vote on. There's an Isle of Harris. Let me see if I can remember. There's an Isle of Harris, there's an Old Comber, and there is a Smurgen as well. So there's a lot of variety there. I think whichever one is chosen by yourselves, and the vote's out now. If you go in the post tab on my channel, you'll see it there. I think whichever one's chosen from the vote will be pretty interesting to compare. So I won't try and sway the vote in any way. I know which one I would choose, but I like to have a little bit of interaction. So yeah, join me in the next part 8C and we'll get on with that comparison. So thanks for your time and goodbye for now.